Ever wonder where certain words come from? Some of them have surprising origins. Let's explore some of them now. This is Rabbi Yossi Madvig, and you're listening to Jews Did It First. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please subscribe and leave a review. It really helps out. Also, if you want to donate to help support the podcast, please go to the website Jews Did It First. No, don't go to Jews Did It First. Go to jewishosswego.org/Jews Did It First. Just hit the Make a Donation button in the corner. And I want to apologize for last week's episode. I guess there was some mix-up on the audio where it got tangled. The Devar Torah at the end got tangled into the last bit. I apologize for that. But I think the gist of it was pretty clear, and hopefully you're able to figure that out. So this week and next week, I want to discuss some words that are of Hebrew origin. And this week is, I'm pretty sure of these, but some of it is conjecture. I'm sort of theorizing a little bit. I can't offer any hard evidence, but I think it's an interesting thing to recognize. Whether I'm right or wrong, I'll present you some evidence. You can do your own research, and you be the judge. So the first two words that I want to discuss are onus and onanism. They sound very similar, but they're very, very different. And in fact, this may not be a super kid-friendly episode, so if you have anyone who's a little bit younger listening, you may want to listen first and decide whether or not you want them to be listening to this. So the one that I'm the least sure of is the one onus. Onus seems to be, according to the dictionary, a Latin word, which means burden or load, and it's usually used in legal terminology, where you have, the onus of proof, or you have to, you need to prove something. The burden of proof is on you. The onus is on you, and it seems to be, everyone says it's Latin origin, Latin origin, Latin origin. Now, the truth is, as you might have guessed, at least according to my theory, Jews did it first. Now, the reason I say this is a little bit controversial is because I can't find any version of the word onus, as I understand it, in the Bible itself. However, there is the word onesh, which is punishment. And it could be that this word, which comes up a lot of times in the Bible, is the origin for this word onus. Now that's somewhat of a stretch. That's not my own theory. This is something I saw somewhere else. It is an interesting theory. However, if you look in the Mishnah, which is a legal code of about, I'd say 1800 years old, at least when it was written. It's collecting from much earlier than that. And also in the Talmudic sources, which is a couple hundred years later, you find the word onus or onus a lot. And it could be, that they just borrowed it from the Latin. There are examples of Mishnaic Hebrew taking from Greek or Latin and using it. Now, the reason I am a little hesitant to suggest that is because it's used entirely different. Now, normally, when they do that, it's used in the same way. And here it's just so different that I'm hard pressed to say. But on the other hand, it was written sort of in the the Pax Romana, the height of the Roman Empire. So it could be that it was a borrowed term. And so onus onus in the Mishnaic Hebrew means force. So if someone is an onus, there's different contexts that you can use that. You can use that in terms of committing a sin. That's usually where it's used, and there's a variety of sins that are described when a person is an onus, so that a person could be forced to convert, a person could be held at gunpoint to eat something that's forbidden, or to, kill them, or I'll kill you, or one of those kinds of things would be an onus, someone who is forced into a position. Now that would be a burdensome position, of course. Another example that onus is used would be a person who is what's called a shomer, someone who's guarding a particular object, or, watching something for someone. Hey, borrow this, or watch my car while I'm out of town, or something like that. Now, in such a case, an onus would be someone who, let's say something happened to that. So let's say you're going out of town, and you say, hey, Rabbi Yossi, I'm going out of town. Can I leave my car? This actually happens to me sometimes. Can I leave my car in your driveway? Is that all right? Sure, no problem. I don't care. Now, let's say I'm at the grocery store, and while I'm at the grocery store, someone comes to my property and breaks into this person's car and steals stuff from it. Now, the doors were locked and everything. It was on my driveway, right where they wanted to leave it. Am I responsible for that? Now, this would be a situation where I'm pretty much an onus. I had nothing to do with this. It wasn't kept in a dangerous situation. The doors were locked. It's a pretty safe neighborhood. They asked specifically to leave it in the driveway. Now, had they say, hey, can I leave it in your garage? Not that I have one. And I said, sure. And then I took it out of the garage and it was on the street. That would be a different situation. But here, where it's just the driveway, everything is in the proper position. Everything is the way that the person wanted it. Everything's fairly safe. And I'm not even home to guard it or to kind of make sure things are okay. And something bad happened. That wasn't my fault. Thank God this has never happened. I'm just trying to describe the situation. So, that is, again, it's a position where I'm an onus. I was not in this case forced, but I was not liable. I was not just not liable, because that really doesn't do it justice, but I was completely and utterly uninvolved and unresponsible in any way, shape, or form. So that really is kind of the opposite of a burden. So the word, my point here is that the word is used in the Mishnaic literature so differently than the Latin. I have to believe that it is a Hebrew word and not a borrowed term from the Latin. That leads me to believe, if that's the case, that the Latin may have taken it from the Hebrew and used it in that specific legal case where it's some sort of burden or load. Now, again, who took it from who? I have no idea. This is just my theory, but it's an interesting one nonetheless. Something to look into further for sure. And probably until we have some kind of time machine, we're never going to know. But what can you do? Now, for my slightly racier comments, I wanted to get into the word onanism. It's pretty uncommon, and seems to have, I was doing some research online, and it seems to have hit a peak usage in around 1901. Not sure why, but you may have never heard the word before, or perhaps you have, you just didn't realize what it meant or where it was from. It first crops up in English, I guess in the early 1800s. And interestingly enough, according to the dictionary, it says that its origin is French or Latin. And I found that quite interesting, and you'll see why in a minute. Now, the definition is it has two definitions, either masturbation or coitus interruptus. And I really want to do this because, it's a rather spicy topic, so I figured that, you don't get to hear rabbis talk about this subject too often, that reminds me, I really wanted to mention another podcast that I've been listening to, that you actually could hear a rabbi talk about some of this sort of stuff. It's called My Life, Hasidus Applied, by Rabbi Shimon Jacobson, and it's half Hasidic philosophy and half issue-oriented. And those issues range from everything, it could be Bible learning to the birds and the bees. So I strongly suggest you check that out. He does a great question and answer thing. It's a really great podcast. I really enjoy it, and you'll learn quite a lot from it. So anyway, enough of that plug. So we have a little bit of background there on what the word onanism means, but where does it really come from? That's right. Jews did it first. So if you go to the book of Genesis, in chapter 38, there's a story that seems slightly out of place. Maybe you've heard the story. After the sons of Jacob sell Joseph, their brother, right, you've heard this, they sold to the caravan, and the Torah then talks about Judah, which is Jacob's fourth son. So Judah moves away, he starts a family, he marries a woman named Shua, and they have 3 sons. The oldest son is named Er. And it turns out Er does something that God doesn't really like, and he dies. What that is, we'll see in a second. But the next son is slated to marry Er's wife in something called a Levirate marriage, or Yibum in Hebrew. This is when a man dies childless, so the brother, one of his brothers, should marry his deceased brother's wife in order to carry on the family, or not just the family name, but carry on his brother's name specifically. So the brother who performed the Levirate marriage was Onan. Now, Onan didn't want to have children with this woman. By the way, her name was Tamar. That was the wife. It's actually a quite common name now. He didn't want to have children because he knew they wouldn't be considered his children. They would be considered the children of his deceased brother. So, in an act of defiance, instead of cohabitating with this woman in the proper way, he would, every time they were intimate, he would perform coitus interruptus. He would disengage in the sexual act, and he would spill his seed, another biblical phrase, by the way, he would spill his seed onto the ground. This, of course, did not make God too happy, and he was also punished by God and died. Now, what happens next is a really interesting story. I highly encourage you to read it, but it's not really relevant to the topic at hand. So go check out Genesis chapters 38, 39. They're really good stuff. Now, what's interesting is that even though in the context of the story, the spilling the seed, what Onan does is really just spilling the seed during intercourse. But the word onanism is sort of a broad term used to mean spilling the seed, or it also can mean masturbation, as I mentioned earlier. Another interesting note is that we actually learn that the first brother, Er, who died, he actually died for the very same reason. And when it says that Onan died in the Bible, the verse says, and he died, also him. V'yamos gam oisai. So the Torah is very precise. It doesn't waste words. No pun intended. So why not just say, v'yamos, and he died? Why does it add 2 extra words, gam oisai, also him? The commentaries explain that Er also committed this sin, and that's why he died, and also Onan died for the same reason. So why don't we call it Erism instead of Onanism? Well, because I think there's a couple reasons. One is it's explicitly stated in the Bible that this is why Onan died. It doesn't state that explicitly regarding Er. We have to learn that out. But I think also because Er's reason for doing this was mostly aesthetic. The commentaries explain that he didn't want his wife to lose her good looks by becoming pregnant, so he decided not to impregnate her. Now, yes, of course, right, pregnant is beautiful, pregnant women are beautiful, etc., etc., but I think we all know what we mean when we're talking about this. Obviously, pregnancy does things to the body that wouldn't happen otherwise, and, for a short time, it's just different, we'll say. We'll leave it at that. Because besides, my wife might be listening in the other room. I don't want to get in too much trouble. Onan, on the other hand, didn't just... it's not like he didn't want to ruin his wife's good looks or something like that. He had a much more nefarious motive. He was trying to prevent his brother's name from continuing in the family and amongst the Jewish people. Because remember, we're talking already past Jacob. So Jacob and all his sons are the Jewish people and all of their descendants. It's not like Abraham, who had Isaac and Esau, where only one son carried on the Jewish line, or Isaac, where you had, Isaac and Ishmael. And then Isaac had Jacob and Esau, where only Jacob carried on the Jewish line. Jacob's sons, all of them, were part of the Jewish people. So he wanted his brother's name to die from the Jewish people. So not only was it a slight against God, because this is a sin to do, but also against his fellow man, especially his own family and his own brother. So it was a much more serious offense for Onan, and that's why it is called Onanism. And in fact, when I looked in the dictionary, it's telling me that the origin of the word is Latin, and then it even says from the biblical story in Genesis chapter 38. So why doesn't it say that the word origin is Hebrew? So I wrote the online dictionary about this because I just felt that they should know. And it's an important distinction, I think. Perhaps, I don't think it's some kind of anti-Semitic slight. I definitely don't think that. I just think, it's important that we should get credit where credit is due, and we should all realize that when it comes to the words onus and onanism, Jews did it first. Like I said, we've got a couple more words lined up for next week, and then I'll start my October surprise, as they call it in the election world. But for October, I have a month of beasts and monsters that Jews did first, so I'm really looking forward to doing that, and I hope you are too. And I'll leave you with a Devar Torah. As many of you may know, next week is the upcoming holiday of Sukkot. Actually, it starts, my goodness, at the time of this recording, starts tomorrow night. So it's up there. And I wanted to share a short story. It's one of my favorite stories about Sukkot. And it goes like this: story from the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Hasidic movement. And on Simchas Torah, which is the last day of Sukkot, he told the following story. On Simchas Torah, everybody sleeps in a little because of all the festivities of the previous evening. But the angels, they don't sleep in. They didn't say l'chaim. They didn't stay up dancing. So the angels find themselves with nothing to do because they got up on time, so to speak, and there was no one else around. So the Talmud tells us that the angels cannot sing the praises of God until the Jews get up and sing his praises. So what are they going to do with all their free time? The Jews are still sleeping, so they decided to clean up a little bit. I guess the heavens were a bit messy. But they found the weirdest things littering heaven. Torn slippers, broken heels. Usually they find tzitzis, the fringed garment that we wear, tefillin, the boxes and straps that we wear on our arms. Similar things like that. But they never came across something like this. What's going on? So they decided to ask the archangel Michael. He's an advocate for the Jewish people. Said, hey, what's this all about? What's going on? So Michael, the angel, he says, yes, this is my merchandise. These are the remains of last night's hakafais, where the Jews danced with the Torah. And Michael started to sort out the tattered shoes by communities. These are from Rezrich, these are from Minsk, etc., etc. And Michael said, the archangel Matat, the Metatron, the most prestigious angel in the heavenly court, ties crowns for God out of Israel's prayers. Well, today I'm going to make a more glorious crown for Hashem out of these torn shoes. Now, that just refers to the last day of Sukkot, Simchas Torah, where it's this extremely happy day. It's all about joy and dancing. But the truth is, all of Sukkot is about joy and dancing. It is called Zman Simchasenu, the season of our joy. And even the intermediate days of Sukkot, we're dancing, we're singing. It's a reflection of what they used to do in the temple times. They would have a special water libation on the Mizbeach, on the altar. And it's called Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the joy of drawing the water. And it says that someone who did not experience the joy of Simchas Beis HaShoeva has never truly experienced joy in their life. That's what it says in the Talmud. So we should keep in mind that as the Talmudic dictum goes, Simcha Peretz Geder, that joy breaks through all boundaries. So if there's any blessings that we need, the heavenly court case is over. Rosh Hashanah has passed. Yom Kippur has passed. We've been judged. Baruch Hashem, we've been judged favorably for a good and sweet new year. Obviously, we're still here, right? So now is time to celebrate. Now is time, if you were to win a tremendous court case that your life depended on it, you would come out of that courtroom ecstatic. You'd be dancing in the streets. You'd be so happy. So too here. We've come out victorious. So we're going to be dancing in the streets, not just on Simchas Torah, but every day of Sukkot. We should be dancing. We should be happy. We should be joyous because Simchas Peretz Geder, Simcha, joy breaks through all boundaries. So if there's any blessings that we need, it's through the joy of Sukkot that we're going to draw down all those blessings that we received on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So I wish you all a good year, a Simcha Dika year, a joyous year. And we should all dance together in the streets of Yerushalayim, in the streets of Jerusalem, with Mashiach, with the Messiah, our righteous Redeemer. Thanks again for listening. Feel free to continue the conversation on the Facebook page, Jews Did It First, or if you're listening on YouTube, you can write in the comments section below, or feel free to email me at rabbi@jewishoswego.org. Any way you choose, I look forward to hearing from you, and have a wonderful and happy holiday. Chag Sameach.